Here we go in three, two, one.
Folks, what is up, and welcome back to the Vol Talk podcast. You are back here with Austin and Blake. That is Austin, and I am Blake, and we are here to talk about all things Vols. And Austin, we have got a few different things to cover because we did miss an episode. So I know our fans were disappointed that we kind of skipped a beat there. I'm going to be honest with y'all, and we're going to have to go ahead and address the elephant in the room. We weren't feeling great after the Kentucky loss. Okay, 78-73. We dropped one at home, close one at home to Kentucky. It should have been. We could have won that game, so that was very frustrating. So we'll talk maybe briefly about that. But the good news is, Austin, we can quickly transition to much better news, which is the Gators came back to Rocky Top. And we were able to get a big win against them, 64-44. So a big 20-point victory over the number 5 Gators. That was the largest margin of victory against a top 5 opponent, I believe, ever for us, if not under the Rick Barnes era.
No, it's in Tennessee history, in program
Tennessee
history.
So
Largest top 5 AP poll win in Tennessee history.
You love it. You love to see that. So we're going to talk a lot about that game. That was a great game. Austin and I watched that together. And then finally, we'll get into, as always, we'll keep you all updated on some football news. We'll get a little bit into the NIL lawsuit settlement between the NCAA and Tennessee. So a lot on the slate tonight, Austin, to talk about. But let's kick it off first with, let's talk about the happiness, the great win against the Florida Gators.
Yeah, man, it was a good win. We did skip the Kentucky episode. We probably just didn't want to get trolled by Kentucky fans, to be honest. Sucks losing to Kentucky. Probably should have won that game. I could have taken my victory lap from that game. Igor went off. Igor Milicic finally broke out, had himself his best game of the year. If we would have won, better believe I would have taken my victory lap. But the Florida game, it was looking grim to start the game just because without Zakai Ziegler, without Igor Milicic, probably my favorite 2 players, probably maybe our best 2 players. Okay, I'm just gonna throw that out there. Maybe controversial, but maybe our best 2 players, both out for the game. So I mean, it was a tough assignment. You got a top 5 SEC opponent. It is at home, but at least 2 of your best 3 players are out at the very least. And but we got the job done, man. It was, I mean, honestly, it really came down to the fact that Florida could not hit a dang bucket. Like, we were playing good defense. I mean, and you got to give us credit for that. But it was interesting, dude. It was literally like the exact opposite of the game that happened in Gainesville. It was like, okay, we went down to Gainesville. We couldn't hit a bucket. We got blown out. Exact same thing happened to Florida in this game. So that was kind of interesting how that happened. But at least we got the last laugh, last game of the year. But yeah, dude, I mean, listen, Chaz Lanier showed up, dude. Like, he hit his threes. Like, I mean, listen, Chaz, his offensive production is so important to the team's success. I still have my question marks, obviously. He's yet to do it on the road this season. That's not happened yet, and he wasn't great in the Kentucky game, but he showed up in this game. He did what he had to do, shot over 50% from 3, and when he's shooting over 50% from 3, dude, he's a difference maker. No question about it.
I mean, yeah, it's hard to beat us when we're playing our best defense on top of Lanier hitting his threes, right? When he's shooting over 50%, we can 1,000% beat anyone in the country, right? When that is happening. So definitely big stuff there. Yeah, Kentucky loss, man, it was tough. Honestly, I was disappointed mainly from the fact that we didn't get to highlight the Igor Milicic breakout game. Let's talk about that real quick, briefly. Again, we'll get over this Kentucky hump just to go ahead and get it done. We gotta do the fans, service. We gotta cover everything, and so it was a tough loss to Kentucky. But man, and honestly, it doesn't change. Essentially, it doesn't change the fact that you still bought that stock
I
when it
did.
was low, and he had a breakout game, and it was huge.
He did. I mean, specifically offensively, he's played well all year. But I mean, a lot of people won't. I mean, people won't give him his credit until he puts up points, and that's what he did against Kentucky. I mean, he had 19 and 9, which is really good. He also had 4 assists. I've said all season long how good of a passer he is. It was a tough game. It's not fresh on mine, so I can't really like go into the details of the game. But I will say, like I don't want to just like gripe about refs every time we have a loss. It sucks doing that, and I definitely don't do that in football because I think the refs probably have a little bit less of an impact in football. But dude, it's tough, man, because it's like in that Kentucky game, I feel like we're at home and we're not getting the favorable whistle. Like we've gone on the road this year, and pretty much everywhere we've gone on the road, it's been the opposite. You know, I said in the Auburn game it was pretty fair up until those last 2 minutes. I feel like the whole Kentucky game, man, it was slightly favoring Kentucky. But hey, they were also shooting like insanely well in that game, and you know, give them credit, they won the game, whatever. But yeah, man, this team is interesting. Like this team can hang with anyone. I mean, we showed that against Auburn. We showed it against Kentucky. I mean, it was a loss at home, which you hate to see. But especially we showed it against Florida. I mean, we really probably our best performance of the year. Although, like, what I'm realizing about basketball, dude, a lot of it's just like luck driven. Like, you know, if your opponent's missing, then woohoo, you win. But if they hit their shots, like it's like in the Kentucky game, they were hitting their shots, so we lost. Florida, they weren't hitting their shots, so we won. And it's not that simple, but I mean, I think that's how you get like that big margin, that 20 point win against Florida, because it's like, dude, like yeah, we were playing good defense, but like a lot of that is Florida just can't buy a bucket, you know.
Yeah, and that's kind of like we talked about in that loss to Florida, where we had that big 30-point loss in Gainesville. You know, again, there's just an element of, hey, you know, sometimes the buckets aren't happening, sometimes the shots aren't falling, and so there's definitely that element. And again, a little bit of that against Kentucky, and again, an unfortunate loss. I'm not going to dwell on it, but I did have to touch real quick on that great value Joker watch. Because he did have a breakout game. But let's use that to transition back to the Florida game and talk about the fact that he did have that breakout game against Kentucky, and then he's out against Florida, same as Zakai Ziegler. And to me, that is the biggest headline coming from this Florida game is, yes, we put on, you know, a defensive clinic, and also, you know, had good offensive production. Lanier was hitting his shots, but the fact of the matter is Jordan Gainey ran this offense, and it was running without a hitch, and we were able to get this huge win that no one, all the ESPN folks picked Florida, by the way, in this game. Shout out to the Vol basketball accounts, social media accounts. They trolled ESPN because they posted the graphic of all of them picking Florida, right? And so they all picked Florida, and probably that had some to do with the fact that we were missing Zakai Ziegler and Milicic, and yet we still not only found a way to win, but we won big.
Yeah, I mean, you made a really good point about Gainey. Like, I don't keep up with college basketball outside of Tennessee. Like, I've tried to get into it a little bit, but it's kind of tough. I'll be honest. Like, I love football so much, and I love other sports. I'm not as big as like a college basketball fan, but I do keep up with Tennessee. I will say, having a dual threat at point guard with Zakai Ziegler and Jordan Gainey, dude, like that has to be at least top 5 duo in the entire country. It has to be. Like Zakai Ziegler is one of the best point guards in the country. Not scoring wise, obviously, we've discussed that, but everything else he does is so good at such a high level. And then Jordan Gainey, dude, like you said, I mean, he was phenomenal in this game. Like that's a huge luxury to have that. Like when Zakai's, because listen, like one thing we didn't talk about with the Kentucky game is Zakai almost went out with a huge injury. Like it looked like Zakai was going to be out for the year. Like, honestly, that's what people were talking. Like, it looked like he had blown his knee out again, and his year was done. Like, that was the chatter happening. But then he came back and played in the second half of the Kentucky game, so I got to give him props for that. But he was out with this Florida game, so it's like, clearly it's like it's a nagging situation for him. And, so it could be huge having a guy like Jordan Gainey down the stretch here with Zakai still battling this knee injury. And God forbid if Zakai were to miss an extended period of time for whatever reason, to have a backup like Jordan Gainey to be able to come in and, like you said, not really miss a hitch. And he's a high-level scorer. He's not as good as a defender, but he's also a good floor general. He doesn't really get to show that when he's coming off the bench. He's really coming off the bench trying to score. Like, that's his primary goal, coming off the bench when Zakai is playing. But when Zakai was out, I mean, he really ran the offense extremely well in this game.
Yeah, huge game from Jordan. I mean, obviously everyone was talking about Chaz Lanier coming out of this game because he was our leading scorer, and he just had a huge game. But the fact of the matter is I'm pulling up the stats now. Jordan Gainey was right behind him with 16 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, and again, like you said, just the fact that he was able to fill Zakai's shoes, without any issues at all. It looked like the same team. That's huge, like you said, is absolutely huge to be able to fill Zakai's shoes when it's he's arguably our best player, probably without a doubt our best player. So absolutely huge performance from Gainey. A few other players had some pretty big performances. Do you want to kind of walk us through some of your game notes there? Had maybe a couple, I wouldn't call them breakout games, but Akpara with 10 points. There's quite a few. The love was spread in this game for sure.
And you bring up Akpara, and it brings me to a stat coming out of this game. But just to touch on him real quick, it's like it doesn't feel like he's been completely unlocked either, even though that's partly his fault. I feel like Igor is more so just like how the offense runs. But sometimes you just when you have a paint advantage, and we did in this game, at least on paper we did in this game coming out of this game, get the ball down to the paint more. I mean, sometimes, and that's what killed us in the Kentucky game. I hate to keep going back, but I keep remembering things. We kept shooting threes in that game, dude. Kept jacking up threes, and we'd have a 5-point deficit, and they're acting like we're down by 50. Dude, sometimes keep it simple. Get the ball in the paint. Let Akpara do something. Let Milicic do something. Let Cade Phillips do something. So this is an interesting stat. I don't know what to make of this because there's a lot of stats in football. One stat I can't stand in football is when they're talking about, every time a running back rushes for over 100 yards, they win the game, or the team wins the game. They're 9-0. A lot of that has to do with game flow. So I don't know if there's a game flow aspect to this stat. I'm not really sure, but it is interesting. So today's win over Florida, which not today, yesterday's win over Florida, made the 9th time this season that Tennessee had 30-plus paint shot attempts. So basically taking 30-plus paint shots. We were 9-0 in those games. 9-0. I would have to take a look at the games, but that seems pretty significant to me. I don't know. Again, I don't know if that's a game flow thing, which it partly is, right? Because I just think about it in my head. It's if you're down, you're going to take threes, right? If you get down early, you're going to jack up more threes, so you're going to have less paint attempts. So that makes sense. But in the Kentucky game, it's dude, you're down 3. Wow, why are you jacking up? They literally, Kentucky didn't make a field goal in the last 4 minutes of the game or something, dude. But we just kept jacking up threes, acting like we're down by 50. So it is interesting, man. That is a notable stat to me, 9-0 in those kind of games. It doesn't mean that's just, completely abandon the three-point shot, play old school basketball, whatever. But, I do think it's notable. And, you mentioned Akpara in this game, dude. Listen, I think it's an advantage. We have that advantage at times, and we don't use it. So I think it is something that we need to unlock a little bit more, or at least when the threes aren't falling, at least understand. Okay, you don't have to take a 3-point shot. It's not required. There's other kinds of field goals in basketball.
Yeah, 1,000%. Because Akpara. And again, like you said, maybe there's something more to it in terms of the game flow and the fact that we were up so big. But I don't think so, because I saw Akpara scoring some shots. I saw Cade Phillips scoring some shots. Cade Phillips also had 7 points when he hasn't been scoring a ton so far this season, and he came in with 7 points, 3 blocks as well. Pretty nice game from Cade Phillips. But the point is those bigs down in the paint, between Akpara and Phillips, scoring 17 points combined, that's significant to me, and speaks to exactly what you're talking about, where it's like, hey, maybe we don't have to be a one-dimensional team.
I do think it's important and it's notable. Cade Phillips had that one awesome play that I feel like we had to talk about this.
Oh, yeah.
Really, Meshack made it happen. Meshack had a great steal and then saved the ball from going out of bounds. And then Cade Phillips passed it up to Boswell, and then Boswell back to Cade Phillips for the dunk. Did it look like the Showtime Lakers out there, dude? It was so sweet. One of the coolest plays of the year by far. And that whole game felt like that. It felt more fluid. And I'm not gonna make Zakai being out so the offense is more fluid. I don't think that makes any sense. I think it's just one of those things that's the offense is more fluid today, and sometimes it's not. That's how Rick Barnes' teams has been. Sometimes the offense is great, and then sometimes you are complete crap, like in the Auburn game. So, and speaking on that too, man, how many lobs did we see in this game? Everybody was throwing up lobs. Yeah. A lot of, I saw plenty that weren't made, but they were still throwing them up. But there was tons that they did complete, and it was a really fun game to watch for that kind of stuff. But yeah, man, Cade Phillips, Akpara, going to be huge pieces down the stretch. Obviously, defensively, they're always a factor defensively, but yeah, especially again going back to that Kentucky game, in that game there was an opportunity for those guys to lessen the gap, to lessen the score gap, instead of just keep failing taking threes. And yeah, that game was poorly managed. So I'll say that. But yeah, get the ball in the paint more, man. I'm all for that.
Yeah, open up the offense a little bit. Obviously, this team is capable of different schemes, right? And so we hope that we'll continue to see that kind of just see those things open up a little bit more, right? See the offense open up a little bit more in terms of the options that we have, and taking advantage of players like Akpara, Phillips, and Igor Milicic when he is hopefully back in the lineup soon. Same with Zakai, but again, just talking about those bigs, down in the paint, taking advantage of that and trying to work that paint a little bit more. But overall, just a huge win against Florida. I thought that it was, not obviously it was important to show, hey, we lost by 30 against them in Gainesville, so we had to return the favor for sure. But it was one of those deals where we're kind of in a skid, and because we're in this difficult part of our schedule, like we've been talking about for so long, all season really. We talked about this gauntlet that we're in, or that we were going to be in, and now we're in it, right? And we had the number one team in the country in Auburn. We had to play Auburn, and then we were playing Kentucky, and then Florida, and so we were on a 2-game skid. It could have gotten ugly if we had dropped this game as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And we didn't.
It could have gotten ugly, and it just kills morale, losing 3 games in a row, especially when 2 out of those 3 games are at home. So if you would have dropped this Florida game, that would have been pretty tough. The season wouldn't have been over, but it's hard to know, man. I feel like this team it's really good. It's one of the best teams in the country, but it's I don't have a ton of confidence in the team in March, because I've seen really poor performances. That performance in Gainesville doesn't just go away because we beat them in TBA. So it's hard to predict going forward. But, it was a tough stretch of games. 1 and 2, not the best. But, really, in all fairness, it could have been 3-0. It really could have been. That's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. We lost to Auburn by, 1 and 2 points. In the Kentucky game, like I say, if we managed that game any differently, 20% differently, then we would have won that game. So, yeah, could have been 3-0. Unfortunate it was 1 and 3 or 1 and 2 in that stretch. But hey, we bounced back against Florida, and I always talk about how they're going to bounce back. and they bounced back really well, obviously, especially with their leader out, their best player out, and great value Joker out. Couple of stats from this game. So this is interesting, just talking about like what happened to us in Gainesville versus what happened to them in Knoxville. So lowest field goal percentage by an AP top 5 team in any game in the last 10 seasons. The lowest was Tennessee at Florida this year on January 7th, 2025, 21.4%. The second lowest was Florida at Tennessee yesterday, 24.5%. That is 3% difference. So weird. Well, not just 3% difference. That's the two lowest. That's literally the two lowest field goal percentages by an AP top 5 team in the last 10 years.
Yeah, that's wild.
It's
that happened. That we traded those.
What are the chances of that, dude? Yeah. Like, that's insane. Like, first of all, yeah, I mean, it would have to take 2 AP top 5 teams playing each other twice in a season for that to happen.
Right.
Which, like, how often does that happen? Not often. And then for them to get the 2 lowest totals, it's a really, really weird 2-game stretch with Florida this year.
It's one of those things that might kind of it might disappear into history and never be talked about again. But because it might not ever happen again. It
won't. I can say without question it will not happen again. In the same season, like that's insane, dude. That's absurd. Now, it was only the last 10 years, but honestly, I feel like that 10-year mark was like the dude just was done researching after 10 years. It could have been that could have been 50 years for all we know.
Could have been forever. Yeah.
It could have been 50 years. And the fact that happened in the same season, the same 2 teams, extremely weird. Don't know what was happening in that series. It's going to be interesting to see if we face them in the SEC tournament. Like, now we're on a neutral court. Do we both shoot like crap? It's literally just going to be the ugliest basketball game in the history of basketball games. We're both going to shoot in the 20 percentile range. It's weird, dude. Super weird.
Who knows? But Vol Talk will be here to cover it when it does happen.
Yes, we will.
Y'all stay tuned. Hit that subscribe button. Give us a like. Drop us a comment. We'll be, and let us know in the comments. What do you think? Do you think that record will ever be broken? No. I call it a record. Do you think that stat line also?
That futility record, yes.
That futility record, yeah. Let us know in the comments what you think. And yeah, the fact that it was, it's odd too, because to me, that's, I don't know the exact numbers, but I imagine that's just like a couple shot difference too, right? Like it might as well almost be the exact same percentage, and 24% versus 21%, 3% is probably just like a couple shots or so, so it's just, that's very bizarre.
It is.
Interesting stat line. Any other kind of headlines coming out of the Florida game, Austin, that you can think of?
One more stat I've got for you. In the last 8 days, which now is 9 days because we're recording on Sunday, Tennessee has held an Auburn team that averages 84 points to 53, and a Florida team that averages 85 points to 44, without 2 starters for us. And Zakai being our best defender by far. Well, not by far. Meshak's pretty close. But pretty impressive, dude. Now, listen, I'll say the Florida game, again, like, just in the spirit of fairness, even though we hate the Gators. And I'm not being fair to the Gators. I'm just being fair to the spirit of basketball. 24% from field goal. Like, that's partly Tennessee, but it's also partly Florida. Like, it's like we can't take full credit for that. But the Auburn game was just like, I give us credit for that game. Like, we did shut Auburn down. Like, that was just a tough, hard-nosed basketball game. And, we didn't have the breaks go our way, which basically just means that we didn't have the refs on our side in the last 2 minutes, is what I mean by that. But, yeah, dude, I mean, listen, it's Rick Barnes, so I'm not surprised by these numbers, but, I mean, it's good to see.
Yeah, you love to see that. That's absolutely massive. I remember seeing that after the Auburn game. They just the fact, well, I was seeing analysts talk about that, holding them, and then we heard the analysts talk about that during the Florida game as well.
Yeah,
essentially holding them to almost about 50% of what their normal average is. And honestly, even the Kentucky game, this is the last time I'll bring it up, but we talked about in the Kentucky preview that they were averaging 88, a little over 88 points a game, and that they were, I believe, like the third highest scoring offense in the country in college basketball. And obviously, the end of that game didn't go our way. But still, so they didn't score 88. They scored 78 on us with, again, a little bit of stuff that maybe was a little questionable, didn't go our way exactly. And so the fact of the matter is the defense is certainly not something that we're going to worry about heading into tournament time, right? The questions, I think, still remain
on the offense,
which is on the offense. Between can Lanier continue being consistently productive? Can we open up some other guys like Igor or whether it's Okpara or whoever else?
Yeah, whoever wants to step up. Whoever wants to step up and be an offensive weapon.
I don't care who it is. Whoever wants to. Gainey off the bench. How many points can he score off the bench? Whoever. Those are the questions that still remain, especially like you mentioned a second or earlier, on the road or not at home. Even on a neutral court site, because Lanier seems to only be able to hit at home.
Correct. Chaz has not. He's literally not shown on the road yet. Like, you cannot point to a single game this season. Like, maybe like a random out of conference opponent, but he didn't do it against Illinois, which I thought was our most notable out of conference opponent at Illinois. He has not done it in the SEC on the road. Now, luckily, during the tournament, in the SEC tournament, he won't have to do it on the road. Like, he'll be, but those games do still impact us because, listen, I think one seed's probably out of the question at this point. It kind of depends. Like, if we go on a run here, we win the SEC tournament, we beat Auburn, maybe we can get a one seed. But it's pretty unlikely. And so those games really impacted us because, you shoot a little better in the Auburn game. You shoot a little bit better in the Vanderbilt game. You don't botch into that game and then I'm not putting all of this on Chaz. It's on everyone. I'm saying if anyone shoots better in those games, then we could potentially be in the position to get a one seed. But we aren't, unfortunately. But yeah, dude, listen, if Chaz hits his threes, this team's ceiling is a national championship. That is this team's ceiling. If he hits his threes, if he can be consistent with that. I just don't have any reason to believe he will be yet, right? Because he hasn't put it together, like a stretch together where he's putting up 20-plus points a game or even 15 points plus per game. But yeah, if he shoots over 50% from three, like that's really all we're missing is that kind of player. And with our defense, which we just discussed, like we can beat anyone in the entire country if that happens. It's just a big if.
Big ol' if. And again, as always, we'll be here talking about it all season long. So y'all can stay tuned with us. But
all it takes is one game where he doesn't.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like you don't get a second chance in the tournament.
Exactly.
So if you get one game where he doesn't shoot well and nobody else steps up, then all of a sudden we scored 40 points and we're out of the tournament.
Well, and that's where the consistency is key, right? Because look, it's heck, if he was scoring 30 points, okay, cool. I would rather you consistently score 18 to 20 points than, score 25, 30 points.
Yes, definitely.
Every couple games and then drop
up 10.
A 2-point or a 4-point or 5, whatever. Yeah. And so, consistency is going to be key, and we'll see if he can deliver come kind of tournament time, because that's going to be the question.
Before we jump into the football, quick shout out. Oh, what? Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was before we jumped into football, I wanted to get an update real quick before we move on from basketball. We do look. This was like kind of the 3-game stretch that was the big gauntlet for our schedule. But we've got number 20 Missouri coming into town in a few days on Wednesday. I wanted to get a check. We don't necessarily have to do a full preview, but I wanted to get a check on the Austin marital problems situation.
Oh, jeez.
Did Callie get you a ticket, or did she not, to the Missouri game?
I think she was looking into it. I think she asked me if I wanted to go to the Missouri game, and I might have told her no. Because I wanted her to focus on the Alabama game. I'm pretty sure we got Alabama at home. I want to make sure we get to that game. And, the midweek games, I like going to we went to a midweek game this year. That's actually the only game I've had a chance to go to, which is the Georgia midweek game. It was cool, but I kind of prefer the Saturday games, if I'm being honest. I just on a personal level. But yes, she at least asked me about Missouri tickets. She at least said, "Hey, do you want a Missouri ticket?" And I might have told her no. Who knows if they're still available? Maybe we'll have in-person reporting. TBD on that. But I was just gonna have a shout out to Lady Vols. Lady Vols actually just beat Missouri on the road. Listen, dude, they're interesting. They are very interesting with how close they have played all their tough competition this year. We could be a problem in the tournament. We really could if some of those, because at the end of the day, dude, we have all these one score or less than 10 points losses to like the best teams in the country. If that variance flips the other way, all of a sudden we could go on a run and have a run in the tournament. And so who knows what the Lady Vol ceiling is like this year, which is crazy to think it's Kim Caldwell's first year, and we're talking about potential run in the tournament, but it's very possible. And it's hard to win, even though Missouri's not the best team. And I'm not going to pretend like I just said how I don't follow college basketball outside of our footprint or college men's basketball. I definitely don't follow college women's basketball outside of Lady Vols. But, Missouri doesn't have the best record, but it's easy to drop those road games, right, in the SEC, whether they have a good record or not. And we found a way to win, so that was today. Shout out to the Lady Vols, shout out to Kim Caldwell for getting it done.
Love to see the Lady Vols back in the win column against Missouri, and again, the men will be playing Missouri as well in a few days. So hopefully we can sweep Missouri in men and women's basketball. And yeah, you'll have to keep us posted if you end up going to the game. But at the very least, happy to hear that the other Douglas household over there is back in good terms after a difficult situation. I know with those tickets.
To be clear for our viewers, it was not a difficult situation.
This
but
is all sarcasm.
It is sarcasm. But Callie did barge in last Vol Talk, so if you're interested in Callie making her Vol Talk debut, it is on the last episode. It's not time stamped like the Brucey shout out was, but it is on that episode if you haven't checked it out yet.
So go and check out that previous episode for that very specific 5-second moment.
And there's no timestamp, so you're literally going to have to go to the... Actually, you know what? On second thought, don't do that. Just stay on this video. Don't go through the trouble of going to find that thing that's not timestamped, very specific. But...
I love it.
It's out there.
Trick them into go. I love it. Trick the viewers into going and watching the full previous episode. Absolutely go find that moment. No, folks, in all honesty, what actually would help us is, like I mentioned earlier, if you can just drop a comment, drop a like on the video, that really helps the algorithm. And we want to start, getting served to some more people, right? I think we're up to 54 subscribers, so we're making our way to 100, folks. And
slowly but surely.
Slowly but surely.
One per month.
That's right.
We'll get there. We'll get there in like 2035.
Listen, unless folks start helping us out, hitting the comments, hitting the thumbs up, that'll get us there faster.
Or if you dare, share it with a friend.
Hey, if you're feeling froggy, hit that share button and send it to a friend. But yeah, go check out that previous episode. It was a fun episode. And yes, all sarcasm here in terms of the marital situation. All is peachy. But Austin, yeah, we did talk about, let's briefly kind of talk about this situation in football. Let's transition to some football. And Tennessee fans in particular are probably in tune with this. There was an announcement recently that the NCAA settled its lawsuit with the University of Tennessee. I believe the University of Virginia also joined us in that lawsuit after we initiated it. And essentially, long story short, Tennessee, quote-unquote, won in the sense that the NCAA settled the lawsuit regarding NIL, and the NCAA can no longer enforce their NIL rules during recruiting. So in other words, recruits and players will be able to negotiate their NIL deals while they're being recruited. And so, look, I'm going to go ahead and preface this by saying, again, our Tennessee fans are probably in tune with this, and honestly, most people are probably like, "Oh, heck yes," right? Like Tennessee stuck at the NCAA, and honestly, at this point, everyone kind of agrees the NCAA is a joke, right? And we're not the biggest fans of the NCAA. However, Austin and I have a little bit of a nuanced position here because while we agree that the NCAA is ridiculous, at the same time, Austin, we're not so sure that this might be the best thing for the sport.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, it's not just football. This covers all sports. Like this would
Correct,
be
correct.
recruits in any sport. But I think it was initiated during football season, so that's kind of why we associate it with football.
Exactly.
But anyway, listen. I'm not the ruling. I don't disagree with. Like I understand, like these people like have this right. They deserve this right to be able to negotiate these deals if that's what we have in place, if that's the system we have in place. My true issue with it is the implementation with NIL, and that we're talking about NIL deals that were supposed to be sponsorships, right? These are supposed to be like, oh, you're on a Toyota commercial, or you got a moonshine cookie deal, which me and Blake are trying to hook up. We're in talks. We'll see where it goes, but it was never supposed to be these collectives essentially created by the university and its donors and whoever wants to donate, like Vol Club. Like Vol Club is an example of a collective who is basically created by the University of Tennessee, used to pay athletes, and no one ever, no one really saw it coming. I never really heard people say this is like a bat or a possibility coming out of NIL and the implementation of it, and no one really I don't know, man. Like I say, it kind of blindsided people, and I don't think really anyone would have supported it either. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to pay the athletes, just sign them to a contract, right? Sign them to a contract like the NFL does. I've said that. Listen, with how bad NIL is and how bad the transfer portal is and how unorganized it all is, wouldn't you rather just, we're already paying the guys, why not have it on paper where if they want to leave a school, okay, you're going to have to be traded, just like the NFL, right? But that's not how it works now. It's unlimited transfer access, and NIL, which is literally just schools paying players, which means schools like Oregon, who the owner of Nike went there, can give them basically essentially unlimited funds. And I said the owner could be the CEO. I don't know, and I don't really care. The point is that it is pay to win at the end of the day in college football as it stands.
Because it flips from, look, tradition used to be important in terms of, okay, where do you want to go to, where do you want to play football? Do you want to play football at a storied, program, or maybe you want to, forge your own path at a program that is still a good program but not as storied, or whatever the case may be. And but then also there was, hey, coaches could come in or teams could make a run, and then all of a sudden you kind of start a snowball of success. And so, hey, players want to come play for this coach thing. But now, like you said, it's pay to win. It comes down to, like you said, the owner of Nike can just give Oregon unlimited funds, and now all of a sudden Oregon, who's never won a national championship, gets to have have the best roster. Or Ohio State, who that's a school of nearly 70,000, I believe, year in and year out is the yearly enrollment, right? So there's just tens of thousands of students who are graduating from Ohio State. So of course they have a huge amount of alumni and a huge amount of rich alumni that can afford to bring in these rosters. And so it's absolutely massive, and it changes the landscape. And so, and again, we don't like, and to your point about contracts, it's like, okay, maybe we trade, if you have them on a contract, okay, maybe you can trade them, or maybe it's not even trade them. Maybe they have to pay their money back if they leave. What a novel concept. Obviously that's not going to be what happens. But the point is that you get them on paper, and it can't just be this wild west where people just get left in the dust. Like, these kids are coming in. Of course they're going to change their minds. They're 18 and 19 years old, and they're going to come in, get their money, and then run after a season, and it's just crazy.
It's not good for the sport when a young athlete, okay, it's hard to even call them student athletes at this point, but a young athlete who is, again, to your point, 16, 17, you have no idea if this person's... A lot of these people have, or a lot of these athletes have good backgrounds with good parents who are taking them in good directions, but a lot of them are led astray by people who they really shouldn't trust. They're now negotiating these deals. And then they negotiate this NIL deal. They sign with a team where you get all happy about it. Oh, we got a 5-star. We got a 4-star. Woohoo. Then they transfer out the very next season. That NIL money stays with them, right? Whatever they were paid stays with them. They contributed nothing. They literally contributed nothing to the team. Most of the time, they're going to be redshirt as freshmen. There is very few true freshmen who are going to contribute right away. It's also putting pressure on coaching staffs to play true freshmen. That is a fact. It's putting, because if they don't get this immediate playing time, then it's very possible that this big investment, which some schools don't have as much investment as others, is going to get burned because the kid is just going to leave the very next season. Like, that's not good for the sport. And going back to another point I made in that diatribe, which is some of these kids aren't being led well. What I mean by that is that in the NFL, right, agents in the NFL take a very small percentage of contracts. Now, they're big contracts. I understand that, so that plays a part. But they're reasonable contracts. Like, this is a reasonable business. Sports agencies in the NFL, it's a very reasonable business. I'm sure there's dishonesty and things that happen, but it's not rampant. When we're talking about high schoolers who, again, some come with rough backgrounds and with people around them who they shouldn't trust, and who see, like, I'm talking about family.
They can trust.
Exactly. I'm talking about family, friends, whatever, right? An uncle. Let's say an uncle comes up to his kid. He's like, oh, I'm going to be your agent. Which this uncle has no idea how to be an agent. He can bring nothing to the table that benefits this kid for being his agent. It's literally just, I'm going to be your agent, and I'm going to get a 20, like some of them 20, 30% cut of what you're making, which is insane, by the way. There's no agency in the world that's taking 20 to 30% of earnings. But not just that, they're also writing up the contracts where kids are signing over NFL earnings. They're signing over rights to everything they earn as far as, like, basically the end of time, like, until they're done being an athlete. And it's like, dude, that's not good for the kids. Now, listen, like, yes, they should have the ability to negotiate these deals under the current system. Like, I understand that, but there's going to be a lot of drawbacks to this, right? I mean, there's a 16-year-old kid right now who is extremely athletic, has a chance to change his family's life, and some scumbag is going to try to scam him out of all his college earnings, potential NFL earnings, and it's going to be really tough to get them out of those contracts, man. So, listen, there's, yay, we beat the NCAA, but, for the health of the sport going forward, like, I don't like it, man. I don't like it. And this is trivial, right? This doesn't matter. But the last couple, during the playoffs, right, we're talking, me and my buddies are talking, and kind of discussing, like, where different guys went to school at. Like, oh, where did this guy play? Dude, some of these dudes, man, you're going to have to start listing out 6 places where they played. Like, it's insane, dude. Like, and again, that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but I always used to love as a kid, like, okay, knowing where this guy went to college and, where he ended up going in the NFL, what he did this. Now it's not just like guys like Joe Burrow, where he transferred once, he went to Ohio State, it wasn't right for him, he went to LSU, he sat his year, which is, dude, a lot of this could be fixed with just that one rollback, by the way.
Yeah.
A lot of this could be fixed. He sat his year and he ended up being an LSU great. But now, dude, it's like even dudes like Dylan Gabriel, he wore 3 different logos on his helmet at the Senior Bowl. Like, I don't want to memorize 4, 5, 6 different schools you played at, man. I don't.
That's foolish.
It's ridiculous, dude. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I saw a funny skit on YouTube about that. Of, a guy, I can't remember who it was. Otherwise, I'd shout him out. But he did a skit like that where it's like, he started doing the NFL player introductions, and it was like, so Miami and Oklahoma and back to Miami and
dude,
then finished at LSU. It's just wild. It's great, and it diminishes. It's just and. I'm not gonna get on my soapbox because I'll out myself as a secret boomer. But at the end of the day,
it's not a secret to our viewers. They already know, man.
The cat's out of the bag.
Cat's out of the bag.
But to me also, it's not just about like this is not going to be good for the kids, and it's they're getting screwed on these deals because they're letting, like you said, these people they think they can trust and all of that. But it's also, man, these are 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, and again, I don't want to keep throwing strays at Lance Hurd, but you look at a guy like Lance Hurd and they get this big payday, and as we've talked about before with that situation, and I'm sure there are others where it's like, okay, he got paid and now there's really no incentive to keep working, and then all of a sudden that money's just and it's just kind of wasted, and all it's about is getting the money again instead of the love of the game, the love of the tradition, the love of and it's unfortunate because it's changing.
And that's never coming back. It is changing the fabric of the game, and that's never coming back. Let's be honest, it's not coming back. We have to adapt in this new era. And I think it would have been fine if it was organized. And that's what it comes back to NCAA, and I'm happy that we defeated the NCAA because it's just a terrible organization. The organization was in place just to take money from people. Just like that's really was what it was about. And because they were bringing nothing to the table. You weren't trying to help the sport grow. That's the thing. You weren't trying to help any sport grow. You were trying to help yourself. And that was it. And that's the problem is that you weren't trying to grow the sport. You weren't doing what was best for the sport. You were doing what's best for you. And really, like now at this point, and I've said this so many times, they're on the world's biggest PR tour, man. They are just they're literally conceding everything. They're bending over to everyone. They are literally hanging on by a thread, and they're doing everything to stay. Like they want to stay in the pockets of these sports because they're like, dude, people know the trick now. They know that we're completely pointless. Nobody needs us.
The gig is up.
Greg Sankey and the Big Ten commissioner, I have not remembered his name, and I probably will never, could literally go make their own league right now, and it would get more viewership than anything left over. And I don't want that for the sport, but that is the reality of the situation. So the NCAA has realized, oh my goodness, people now know. Like for 100+ years, nobody could figure out that they're completely useless. Completely. And now people realize it. And it's part of it's a good thing, and part of it's like now you have unregulated transfer portal, unregulated NIL. And I told you, dude, and I have to reiterate this point. NIL would not be as big as a problem if they did not change the transfer rules. That to me right now is the core problem with college football, because if you made it where a kid had to sit out for a year and God forbid had a year where he couldn't earn NIL, dude, the number of transfers and the number of instantly, dude, overnight, dude, you won't see the activity that you see in the portal. Overnight it will change. You'll see these things happen even with high school students will be different because, listen, they won't just take the NIL check into consideration. They'll take into consideration what's best for my future, what's best for my family, what's best for me, not just how much money can I get in this one trip. in this one trip to this college. Because guess what? If I want to go 1 year, get a huge bag for a season, and then transfer somewhere else the next year, who's stopping me? Nobody's stopping you. That's the problem. And you can literally go play for another team 3 months after you transfer.
And it's you're absolutely right that it would instantly change if we change that rule, and I think for the better. Now, but of course, here's the problem, right? Ultimately, the problem is that you talk about Greg Sankey and the Big Ten commissioner, and these schools and blah blah blah. The schools don't. The schools are okay with it because everyone wants it to benefit them, right? Everyone, okay, hey, I want my transfer players to be able to play immediately because I need them to be able to play immediately, right? And and so then it becomes like a thing where it's no one can. I don't want to call it a Mexican standoff, but no one is like, hey, wait a minute, time out. I'm gonna take a bullet so that we can, the whole, because ultimately no one else is going to, right? If one school stood up and said, hey, wait a minute, this is not good, we need to change this. They can't expect any of the other schools to do that. And ultimately, unfortunately, just like the NCAA was out to make money, and they like to power.
Everyone
They're
is.
unnecessary bureaucrats. Everyone is, right? Greg Sankey, Big Ten commissioner, these schools, right? It's all about money. All these places are about money and making money, and just like the athletes are, and so. It is difficult because, and I get the argument, right, that, hey, the athletes, it wasn't fair for the athletes to not get a piece of this huge situation where there's millions and millions of dollars and they just kind of get left out. I get that, but, man, we should have instead taken a look at the NCAA and said, hey, wait a minute, we need to reform the NCAA and, to your point, make it about being what's good for the sport, right? As opposed to just going the opposite direction and being like, oh, you know what? These people are bad, so let's just let everyone else be bad too, and just make a complete muckery of it, and just all mucked up, and it sucks because ultimately, and I'm always gonna cry about this probably until my dying day, that in real time we're witnessing the fabric of college football and college athletics in general change, and that's why I was always a bigger fan of college sports, right? I'm not as big into professional sports because, hey, look, I get it. That's even a higher level of play in professional sports. They're even better. It's the best of the best. Okay, great. To me, what's more entertaining is in college sports where you can have these crazy underdog stories, where you can have, it can be about the passion and the love of the game and, rivalries, right? The pageantry, the tradition, all of these things just make it a much more enjoyable, because it's like, we're the Vols, man, right? Like, this is Vol Nation. People have a passion for that. Whereas it's just, when it's all about the money, it's not about that. And so that's where I'm a little heartbroken. Like you said, hey, we beat the NCAA, but at what cost, I guess?
I will say, from an optimistic view, I wonder if it will change. Like, listen, money's going to talk always, and there's always going to be high school recruits that just care about money. But I think if some of these athletes studied Lance Hurt's situation and realized that the instant gratification I get from NIL is nothing compared to the NFL check. It will never compare to the NFL check, by the way, ever. You will never get the NFL bag in college. It will never happen. Plus, you also have the competitive side of that, which is you can leave an all-time legacy in the NFL. Like in college, you can do that as well. But if you do that in college, it's gonna turn into you getting drafted in the NFL. Right now, Lance Hurd is undraftable. Right, he's undraftable. Like, he would, if he was eligible this season and he declared for the NFL draft, he would be a UDFA. He would not be drafted. And listen, like, that 900,000 ain't gonna stretch as much as 90 million, bro. It's not. Yeah. So I hope some of these kids and some of these parents of these kids realize that, hey, maybe it's better for us to go for a little less money and do what's best for the future, not just right now. And some of these kids don't have that luxury, and I get that. From someone who wouldn't have had that luxury in high school, I understand that. Like, I get it. But if we're talking about a difference of a couple $100,000, like, you gotta really like think that over. And listen, Oregon has put out some great NFL talent, but Oregon's never recruited at the level they've been recruiting recently, ever. So if I'm some of those athletes, I ask myself, why is that the case? Okay, and because you know why you're going there, right? Because Mr. Nike's writing the checks. That's why you're going there. But ask yourself, why haven't they won a national championship? Right? I would just ask those kind of questions. Those things are relevant, dude. Those things are relevant.
I would be asking, why is it that their biggest selling point before the money was their uniforms?
And now it's money. Like,
and
come
now
on,
it's
man.
money. Like, yeah. And by the way, the uniforms were coming from the same source the money is, Nike. Right?
I'm an Ohio State hater, but and they listen. They pay a lot of money out too, and you discussed that already. But if my choice is between Ohio State and Oregon, okay, just look at the history of Ohio State. Look what they've done. Look what they produced in the league, man. Like, those kind of things I would take into consideration more than a couple extra $100,000. Like, because we're talking about generational wealth versus, okay, I'm gonna be good for a while. And maybe you can stretch out $1 million the rest of your life if you're really smart with your money. Which my bet is 18-year-olds aren't going to be smart with their money.
Exactly. They're gonna, oh shoot, 900,000. I can buy me a Charger. I can, get me, this. I can blah 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 shoes and this, that, and the other. Right. Instead of, like you said, if you just put in a few years of work and make the smart choice instead of just going to Oregon, then you can have that, plus your kids can have that, plus their kids can have that, plus, and so on and so forth. So, again, we beat the NCAA, but at what cost? We just went on this big diatribe that lasted.
Oh, you can't get me going on that stuff, man. I'll go all night.
I know. I don't think we expected it to last this long, but it did, because we have strong feelings on it. And again, honestly, the folks who are watching this, maybe you all have a different opinion. Let us know in the comments. We can handle differing opinions, even if they are wrong, right? Luckily, you have the freedom to be wrong in this country. But at the end of the day, like we said, most Vols fans probably disagree with us. Are probably happy to see that we beat the NCAA. And again, it's like, yeah, I don't have any love for the NCAA, but what's the cost of the sport? And so something's eventually got to change. I mean, things are changing drastically every day in college athletics. So we'll see where the pieces fall. Vol Talk, as always, will be here to discuss it and talk about it, and maybe go on some diatribes and rants, depending on the outcome. Austin, any other thoughts on any other topics before we close out this episode?
No, man. Got the co-host Brucey with me again. You can't see his face right now, but kind of see the lower half. I'll kind of blur that out. Maybe we'll get a little edit or something. But little Brucey in the background running co-host again tonight. So appreciate Brucey. But yeah, that's it, man. F the NCAA and go Vols, baby.
Listen, maybe one day we will, once again, if folks will just hit the comment section for us and hit the like button for us, and we can get up to 100 subs and then 1,000 subs, maybe one day we'll be able to invest in a specific Brucey cam.
Maybe.
And we'll keep an eye on Brucey the entire episode. Of course, that's mainly for the folks who are watching us on YouTube, but hey, shout out to the folks who are listening to us on Spotify as well. Wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching, we appreciate you all.
Well, it's just Spotify and YouTube, first of all.
Yeah, well, look.
There's no other avenues right now. It's just Spotify and YouTube.
Hey, wherever they're watching us.
Okay.
YouTube or Spotify.
Yeah.
We appreciate the support. And thank you all for letting us skip an episode. Again, we had to recover from the Kentucky loss. We were pretty salty about it, but we recovered from that, and we're back in the W column against the Florida Gators. Tennessee Vols won big in men's basketball, 64-44. Love to see that. Coming up, we've got Missouri on Wednesday. Once again, a top 20 matchup, depending on how the AP poll falls. This week, we'll be playing yet another 20 top 20 matchup against Missouri, and so we'll be looking forward to that. We'll review that game. We'll see you guys on the other side of the Missouri game. Until then, go Vols.
GBO.